Welcome to Tesla Global, the home of the latest and greatest Tesla news. Today we take a look at Tesla wrapping the new motor in carbon fiber, making the car faster. Without any hesitation, let's get into the video. Carbon-wrapped motor may make Tesla Roadster even quicker. Elon Musk calls it the most advanced motor on Earth outside of maybe a lab somewhere. Tesla may not need to have a tri-motor setup powering its upcoming Roadster electric sports car. The manufacturer's electric propulsion technology has advanced since the model was announced, and with its new motor with carbon-wrapped rotor is smaller than older units, yet it is capable of delivering superior RPMs and thus better performance too. Electric points to new tweets from Tesla CEO Elon Musk, who recently gave more details on what exactly the advantages of this new powertrain tech are, and he even alluded to the possibility that even more performance is just over the horizon for the Roadster. He said, "The Plaid carbon-wrapped motor is arguably the most advanced motor on Earth outside of maybe a lab somewhere. We have to keep some secrets. We have a few ideas for increasing torque and max RPM even further for new Roadster. Definitely fun and exciting engineering ahead." This to us sounds like the new carbon-wrapped rotor tech has more to give, and that for the Roadster it will offer even more performance than it does in today's Plaid model. Musk also pointed out what exactly the upsides of this new tech are. He said that the main advantage of this is a much stronger M field compared with a rotor that is held together by metal, usually high-strength steel. Other advantage is that rotor can go to higher RPM, as carbon sleeve, mostly, stops copper rotor from expanding due to radial acceleration. Fiber is wound over rotor at high tension load. Machine to do this was made by Tesla Automation. Carbon sleeve must put copper rotor in compression or it loosens at low temp due to differential thermal expansion. Preload is also helpful for maintaining precise gap to stator. Tesla delayed the Roadster until sometime in 2022, we don't know exactly when. Engineering work on the model should be concluded this year, though, and the last time Musk mentioned this he seemed certain the company would have a drivable release candidate by the end of this summer. This was in late January of this year, and since then no additional information on when the Roadster will be ready was provided. Tesla's carbon-wrapped motor. The last week or so, the new carbon-wrapped motor to be used in the Tesla Model S Plaid has been everything anyone has been speaking about. It's been touted as innovative, revolutionary, and the most advanced motor in the world, and is apparently the first production electric motor that had a carbon overwrap rotor. I'm somewhat at a loss here. I mean, we know the drill. A non-motor expert company person, usually either the CEO or some PR person, speaks to a non-motor expert journalist. Both try to convey their understanding in a way they think a layperson would best understand, and the end result is nigh incomprehensible to actual specialists. But, this is perhaps the most extreme case so far. Anyways, this post is about carbon fiber sleeves, as you may have guessed. It'll briefly cover their traditional uses, and then go through some ways that Tesla might be using them. All examples in this post were computed with EM tool. So let's dive in. Traditional uses. Unlike what is implied in the news, carbon fiber wrappings have been long used in high-speed machinery, turbos and compressors and the like. Usually, such motors are surface PM motors, like in the pic below. The cyan arc thing is the permanent magnet, located on the surface of the rotor core. To stop the magnet from flying away at high speeds, the entire rotor is wrapped inside a thin-walled cylinder, black in the pic, of some suitable material. A perhaps older solution would be to use a non-magnetic metal sleeve, like titanium or Inconel. This approach has many good things. A metal sleeve is quite strong, and has very similar thermal expansion characteristics compared to the rest of the rotor, more of that soon. The main drawback is that metals are good electrical conductors. As a consequence, strong eddy currents get induced in the sleeve. The pic below shows an example. The snapshot illustrates the eddy currents at 20+000 revolution per minute in SI units, so peaking at close to 10 amps per millimeter squared. From the pattern of the eddies, you can perhaps guess that they are mainly caused by the stator slotting. These eddies cause losses and impair the efficiency. And perhaps more importantly, they can make thermal management of the rotor tricky. Like you should be able to guess by now, carbon fiber sleeves are another option. Carbon fiber composites are quite poor conductors, at least transversely, meaning perpendicularly to the fibers, and thus almost free from eddy losses. But on the flip side, they are real nasty pieces of work, thermal expansion-wise. Which they don't do, really. They don't expand. The rest of the rotor does. Meaning, the carbon fiber sleeve gets stretched as the rotor expands thermally. And since carbon fiber is, as we scientist engineers say, stiff AF, that expansion generates large stresses into it. At the same, the sleeve must still fulfill its purpose even when the rotor is cold. Remember, it is there to keep the magnets from flying away. Meaning, it will have to sort of compress the rotor, to apply enough pressure on the magnets that they stay attached to the rotor. And, it has to do this at the top speed, plus some margin. Meaning, it will have to cancel the centrifugal stresses from the magnet mass and its own mass, and still apply net radial force to the magnets. This, in turn, implies that it will apply a larger pressure when the motor is stationary, commonly called pre-stressing. Altogether, the sleeve must be sized appropriately to survive its own pre-stress, plus the centrifugal forces at top speed, plus the extra forces from thermal expansion. Tesla use IPM indeed. The pic below illustrates the motor structure quite nicely indeed. It has the low V shape that the Model Y did, and like most traction IPMs do in some permutation or another. Importantly, we can clearly see that there is no iron bridge between the magnets. At the tip of the V there might not be any in the interpole region either, near the rotor surface, although that is difficult so say for certain from the pic. This type of structure makes sense, and is in many ways optimal for VIPMs. For contrast, the pics below illustrate the typical IPM rotor shape, with bridges both at the V-tip and in the interpole space. Normally, these bridges are required for mechanical stability, and offer an easy path for some useless leakage flux to flow. By contrast, the Plaid motor appears to get rid of the bridges, using the fiber sleeve to hold the rotor in place. This of course eliminates that leakage flux path, and allows the rotor to spin at higher RPMs. On the flip side, the sleeve in the pic does appear to be quite thick, definitely more than the sublim that I first assumed. This automatically implies that the motor has a magnetic air gap, physical gap plus sleeve, way bigger than the typical ~1.5 mm seen in traction IPMs of this size. Indeed, the magnets in the pic seem quite thick, too, presumably precisely to drive enough flux over the gap. Ramblings on torque. Now that we're at it, the air gap length of a traction PM motor is a curious beast. Unlike what one might expect, smaller is not better. Insert some suitable wife joke here. Remember, a VIPM produces torque by two mechanisms, PM torque and reluctance torque. Normally, the PM torque is by far the dominant component at small to moderate loads, with a progressively larger contribution from the reluctance component at higher loads. Increasing the air gap brings both components down, initially, but the PM torque can be quite easily returned to its initial level simply by slamming in a little more magnet material. The reluctance torque per amp is not easy to restore, though. But, if we can increase the air gap and keep the saliency ratio, LQ/LD, the same, we can actually increase the peak reluctance torque achievable. After all, the reluctance torque ultimately limited by the motor saturation or demagnetization risk, whichever happens first. By increasing the air gap we can still drive the machine to similar levels of saturation or flux linkage, but now with higher currents, meaning higher torque. Of course, this all depends on the colossal if the saliency ratio and flux paths stay relatively unchanged otherwise. Final note, I initially thought the news about a carbon-wrapped motors were not about an IPM. This is mainly because they kept rambling and quoting themselves about a copper rotor, which I find very hard to associate with an IPM. Now, it seems that there's a simple explanation: there is no copper. It wouldn't be the first time Musk has gotten confused in his communications. Overall, Tesla Model S Plaid will apparently have carbon fiber retaining sleeves in their motors. It's an IPM, with fewer or no bridges at all in the rotor, at the cost of a reduced air gap. What do you think of the carbon being used to make the car go faster? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like rating to help the video, and if you are new to the channel, then why not subscribe? Thanks for watching.